Hello, I'm a housewife in my mid-50s. Because I'm not very educated, my writing skills are poor, but I have a story I want to tell, so I'm sending you this story. Looking back, my life was full of ups and downs. I was born in a poor cabin in the deep mountains. There were only 3 people in my family: my grandma, my single mother, and me. I had an older brother, but he died before he was weaned as a baby. It was common in those days. My dad was a soldier. I can't even remember my father's face. When I was a toddler, he volunteered and went to fight in the Vietnam War as a means to support our family, but in the end, he didn't return. I grew up hearing those stories. And Susan, my paternal grandmother, mistreated my mom, calling her a bad omen who made her husband die. It was a sad predicament for a widow who had lost her husband. So my mother always used to tell me when I was young, "Don't you ever live like me. I hope you meet a husband who will live a healthy, long life and have lots of sons." At that time, I never imagined that I would have the same life like my mother's. I never knew what fate meant. I graduated from public school with my local friends, but I had to be content with just seeing them off as they left for middle school. My paternal grandmother insisted that the daughters should not be educated but be trained as a housewife. My mom wanted to send me to college, but she was powerless because of my scary grandmother. Instead of carrying backpacks, I had to carry a hoe and shovels to work in the fields and valleys to learn to farm. Then one day, my mom suddenly passed away. My paternal grandmother blamed herself for not even getting a dose of the tuberculosis vaccine for her only daughter-in-law and became ill. Soon after, my grandma also passed away. I had no one to take care of me, so I went to a sewing factory that was introduced to me by a distant relative. As I'd lived only up in the deep mountains, the city was full of strange and wondrous things. However, I quickly became tired of arduous factory work, but I kept telling myself how fortunate I was for not starving and continued on. After several decades, my boss, who was kind to me, introduced me to a man from a prestigious family, and I got married. I was full of dreams and went to my in-laws' house with high expectations. But I was shocked. I thought my husband was well off, but in reality, the family was worse than poor. It left me speechless. Fortunately, my husband was a very nice person. I've been in difficult circumstances. He graduated from college per his grandma and parents' wishes and had a good personality. My mother-in-law was strict, like the lady of a noble family. That newlywed life was difficult, but I was happy nonetheless. I'd always been in charge of the household chores since childhood, so it was nothing new, and my grandmother-in-law always came to my aid. Whenever I became tired of my mother-in-law's harsh demands and got teary-eyed, I would go to my grandmother-in-law. I secretly sought comfort from her. Then she would give me some candies that she put aside for me as if I was her granddaughter. Soon after, I gave birth to twin sons. I felt like I owned the whole world when I had not one but 2 sons at once. But my happiness did not last. My husband died before our sons were even 3 months old due to an accident. My husband went to a safety inspection at a construction site and was hit by a crane. By the time I rushed to the hospital, he was already a cold corpse. It felt like the world had fallen. I don't know in what frame of mind I went through the funeral. I couldn't even remember anything. However, I couldn't be in sorrow because I had the twin babies of less than 3 months and the in-laws to take care of. So, I had no time to mourn. Others called me a hard woman, but to protect my babies, I would do harder things because I'm a mother. My 2 children were very bright, taking after their father. I couldn't afford to send them to any tutoring, but their grades were always at the top. I often heard that they were sure to go to Harvard. By the time my sons entered high school, my mother-in-law finally began giving me her respect. She took a step back from housekeeping and didn't nag at me as before. At me, I heard this only later, but the reason my mother-in-law changed toward me was because of a warning from my grandmother-in-law. Why don't you let your daughter-in-law be in charge of the household? XPN we, since your grandson's all grown up now. I'm telling you this because I'm worried about you. Your daughter-in-law came into a poor family and suffered a lot, right? Let's sit back and let her run things. My grandmother-in-law was a very wise person. She gave respect to her daughter-in-law, but at the same time found ways to side with me. However, she fell ill with a terrible ailment. It was Alzheimer's disease. I believe it was caused from the shock of losing her daughter-in-law and her 2 great-grandsons at the same time. I wanted to give up everything too. I didn't think I could live all by myself. My mother-in-law and my 2 sons got killed by a drunk driver when they were returning from visiting my husband's grave. Overnight, I lost my mother-in-law and my beloved 2 sons, which caused me to collapse and give up eating. At that time, frankly, it was difficult for me to live, so I didn't think about my grandmother-in-law's pain. But it seems that my grandmother-in-law's shock was just as great as mine. She lost her daughter-in-law and 2 of her great-grandchildren. Whatever the reason, the only family in this world was my grandmother-in-law and me. Only the 2 of us were left. As I buried my beloved family members, I made a promise to myself. As much as I received from my grandmother-in-law, I would take care of her for the rest of my life. And my grandmother-in-law with dementia was back in the days when she was living with my mother-in-law. "Hey, you bitch," she would say, "how many times did I tell you that you must wash the clothes by hand?" "Grandma, those can be washed by washing machines," I would reply. "How dare you talk back to me? You're an unlucky bitch," she would retort. And my grandmother-in-law, who gave me freedom from my harsh mother-in-law, was now giving me another harsh treatment as I had received before. My grandmother-in-law had a habit of calling me an unlucky bitch. As time passed, her yelling and calling my names became louder, enough for the neighbors to hear, and people started to talk bad about her. "It's that old lady who used to be mean to her daughter-in-law is still being so mean," they would say. "If she is going to lose her mind, she should be in a nursing home." Whenever people said that, I defended my grandmother-in-law. I knew she wasn't sincere when she called me those names. However, as her illness got worse, her treatments toward me became harsher. She didn't like my housekeeping ways and criticized everything, insisting on being thrifty. The only menu we could have was a clear broth and a piece of bread. If I put more than a few pieces of bread, she would yell at me. "You'll put us into a poor house," she would say. "A bitch like you should be kicked out of this house, you bitch." Get out of my house. Get out. Sometimes she would even pick up food particles off the sink and eat them. I tried hard to be understanding of her at that time. I remembered what I heard about my grandmother-in-law when she was young from my husband and my mother-in-law when they were alive. My grandmother-in-law was a miser of the misers. She was a laughingstock, but she did her best to save whenever she could. The reason she was like that was due to her husband. Her husband was a son of a very wealthy family who owned half the town's land and had many servants. However, her husband got addicted to gambling that drove the family to poverty. Despite that, my grandmother-in-law raised her children and even paid off all his gambling debts. As I heard that, I really respected her. She reminded me of my own mother who died early, as well as my own father who tried to support his family and joined the Vietnam War but didn't come back. Easy Capel and her mother-in-law, who lived in her youthful time, would hide any money whenever she could get her hands on it. Even though I understood my grandmother-in-law's condition, it didn't mean that it was easy. Her persistent ways to force savings made me grow tired. Whenever I went to search for the money that she hid, I started to question why I have to live like this. As I became exhausted, Grandma's condition became worse. At some points, she started to follow me secretly whenever I talked with anyone, and she would accuse me. "Are you scheming to take my money and run away?" "Never, you bitch." It was bad enough that at my age, I'm being treated like this, but now I couldn't even talk to my neighbors in peace. One day, while my grandma was sleeping, I was trying to clean up quickly. If she woke up, she would start nagging at me. So I was carefully cleaning the floor, but she woke up and saw me cleaning the floor and screamed at me. Then she even took a long stick to whip me. She treated me like a thief and whipped me so hard that I thought I couldn't put up with her any longer. She didn't stop hitting me, even though her slashes cut into my skin and caused bleeding. I finally grabbed her hand, and with force I took away the stick and hit her once. "See? Doesn't it hurt? Your hitting me hurts me too. I can't put up with you anymore. I can't." I realized then that Alzheimer's disease wasn't something I could handle. Finally, I decided to put her into a nursing home, and I got advice from a neighbor. Her oldest daughter worked at a nursing home. Thus, with her help, I cheerfully prepared to send my grandma to a nursing home. Was it because I wasn't educated? The paperwork process was complicated and took a long time. It's in truth, even after I decided and was preparing, I was in conflicts. It felt like I was guilty of sinning. For it has happened while being at a loss, I decided to take a trip with my grandmother-in-law. I took her to my hometown where I grew up in the mountains. However, the place was now developed with a resort built there. I sat at the changed place and told her about my childhood. I told her what my mother told me, "Don't live a life like mine." Then my grandmother-in-law gave me a hug and said, "Oh, my poor daughter, how hard you must have suffered." But she also said, "You should not get greedy for money. You cannot play cards, ever." Those were the last words my grandmother-in-law said to me. When we returned from our trip, I fell asleep in her arms as she sang me a lullaby, and that's how she passed away. But to my poor finances, I had to have a humble funeral at our house. But thanks to the neighbors, my grandmother-in-law wasn't that lonely. Aside on the day of her burial, two strange men who I had never met came to our house. They said that they were half-brothers of my husband, and before I could stop them, they started to take stuff. They were so unscrupulous that they even took every silverware in the house. As they left, they said a warning to me, who was dazed. "Be sure to move out. We're directly blood-related, so the house is now ours. We're doing it per law, so don't argue with us." They said they would return later, and the next morning, I went to see an elder in the neighborhood and told him about what happened. He happened to know of them. Those were the sons my grandfather-in-law had outside of his marriage. He was a gambler and was kicked out by my grandmother-in-law. Before he left, he stole everything she had saved and ran away. So my grandmother-in-law and my mother-in-law lived as if they had no one. Even my husband had never mentioned his father. Then I felt frantic. It seemed that I would lose the house to those people. So I went to see an attorney introduced by my neighbor. The attorney told me that even if there's no will left by my grandmother-in-law, I was entitled to the assets left behind because I had taken care of her until she died. But in order to claim my rights, I had to file a lawsuit. However, I was scared of the lawsuits, and I didn't have any money for filing it either. I passed without any solution, and those two bastards came with a strong young laborer with them, scavenging all over to find the title to the house. They weren't satisfied with that, and checked every corner like a hungry hyena looking for anything worth money. I got my neighbors to help and stood against them, but we were no match with the strong laborer. Then the two bastards even took out the linoleum off the floor, and everyone was at a loss for words. That's below the linoleum were stacks of cash spread all over the floor. My grandmother-in-law had hidden money there. Then cash was coming out of every corner here and there. Those bastards smiled slazily and gathered up all the cash. I couldn't just stand by. It wasn't because I was greedy. I just couldn't let them take the money that she had saved, just because they were related by blood. If that happened, I knew that my grandmother-in-law would be so heartbroken. So even though I was frail, I blocked in front of them. Upchester questions. "Are you human? Hey, you're talking fool. Why are you going crazy because you see cash? This money is ours. You're not related to us, not one drop of blood." Then one of them lifted his arm to strike me. Right then, the elder from the neighborhood found something on the floor. At a glance, it looked like a letter that was written in cursive, and the only one who could decipher it was the elder, so the letter was handed over to him. The two bastards looked unhappy, but looked resigned. After reading the letter, the elder patted my shoulder and said, "The real hidden daughter was there all along. You've suffered for a long time. Everyone here in the neighborhood can vouch for that." The frightened two bastards demanded to let them have the letter, but the neighbors blocked them. Then the elder read the letter out loud for everyone to hear. "It's dear my beloved granddaughter-in-law, should any bastards claim to be related to me after I die, Don't give out even a penny. The elder read the letter out loud for everyone to hear. Dear my beloved granddaughter-in-law, should any bastards claim to be related to me after I die, don't give out even a penny. They were the ones who put nails to my heart that I kicked out of my house. They were the heartless ones who didn't want to spend any money when their own brother and mother passed away. I've disowned such heartless grandsons, so you don't need to bother with them. All my properties are left to my granddaughter-in-law. Don't leave behind even 1 penny and take them all and spend them well for the rest of your life. I'll eat well and travel and live happily as I didn't offer that when I was alive. Executions to authentically attraction, I had a heartbroken life, but because of you, my granddaughter-in-law, I lived happily before I left this life. Don't forget, in this world, my only daughter related to me is you. I didn't want to wake you, so I leave these few words, so don't hold it against me so much. It was the will she wrote as I fell asleep in her arms. At her last words, I started to weep, and the rest of the neighbors also cried along with me. Those 2 bastards who came to steal the money looked bewildered. They tried to run away secretly, but the door was blocked by the neighbors, who were about to attack them to kill. A few bastards. Did you hear that clearly? Your grandma said that you're not her grandsons. You're not human and you have no right. The 2 bastards who were about to strike back were barely able to escape from the angry neighbors. I took a bowl of dirty water and threw it at them. After that, they never came back. So, with the money my grandmother-in-law left me, I was able to hire an attorney and file a lawsuit against those 2 bastards. It was to compensate for everything they took and the damages they caused in the process of searching the house and to pay for the living expenses I had spent taking care of their grandmother. A few days later, they sent their answer. They paid for the things they sold and returned the unsold ones. I was compensated for the remaining loss. In terms of compensation for taking care of their grandmother is still being tried. My attorney said that because there are many witnesses and proof, I would not need to worry. When the chaos settled down, I finally went to my grandmother-in-law's grave to say my apologies. I felt guilty for preparing to send her to a nursing home before she passed away. I couldn't inherit her money as if nothing happened when I had thought of that. A few days later, I took only the absolute amount of money that I needed right away and donated more than half of the amount to an orphanage. And I felt donating in my grandmother-in-law's name was worthy to remember her. I also wished that no young children would suffer because of poverty like me. My mom was worried that my life would take after hers and suffer. But thanks to my grandmother-in-law, I was able to cut the cycle of poverty. I also donated most of the money to the neighbors who helped me. I wanted to be of help to someone else too. In the future, I plan to live for the rest of my life thinking about my grandmother-in-law. I will miss her so much. However, it won't be a lonely journey. The fond memories became a reason to live. Thank you for listening to my story. For everyone who listened, I hope all of you will be healthy and happy. Please cheer for me and rate your comments of wisdom in the comment section. Pressing like and subscription is a big help to me. Have a nice day.